Georgia Lee Hussey, welcome back to So Money.
Oh, it's so good to be here, always.
You have brought something really meaty to my attention.
Mm,
And at first I was like, I don't know. But then I thought about it and I said, well, certainly I feel like observing this in our very liberal town of Montclair, New Jersey.
mm.
You're in Portland. You just came back from, I think it was Austria.
Vienna, yeah,
Sorry,
Austria.
Vienna. And there's this I don't know if it's we can say it's a new thing, but maybe we can. And I want to hear your thoughts on what you're observing with respect to quote unquote progressives and their feelings about paying taxes. What are you
Mm.
seeing?
Yeah, it sort of started out as an uncomfortable murmur in the back of my mind in the conversations I was having. This sort of, oh, I didn't expect you to say that. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect resistance about this. I didn't, anyway, just sort of in whether I'm in a tax planning meeting or the clients that we work with are very wealthy people who are hiring modernists specifically because they want to understand what enough is, and they understand there are systemic issues that have made their lives easier and other people's clearly not as easeful. And so that frame, knowing that we all identify as progressive and we're all interested in these conversations, has made it sort of a little sneaky, this sense that something's changing.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I started hearing it maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, and then it's really picked up steam and really since COVID. Maybe it's 8 years ago, and then COVID really started ramping
Hmm.
up the issue.
Can you give me a really concrete example? Like take me to one of these meetings recently.
Mm. So you may or may not know Portland now has one of the highest tax rates in the country. We're behind New York, but not barely. And California, if you combine it with our state taxes, it's a very high tax rate. And that is in part because Portland is a little bit of a laboratory for progressive policy, because we have had a history where we'll vote for some crazy ass ideas, to be honest. And that hasn't worked out particularly well in the last 6 years because we decriminalized small amounts of drugs in the November 2019 election. And then they were decriminalized as COVID started and fentanyl spiked.
Wow.
So there weren't the operational infrastructure for places for people to detox and be put into treatment. It was just decriminalized. And suddenly you could get high for 8 aluminum can bottles or aluminum cans. And this is an example of so we have this problem, we decriminalize, then we start a metro housing bill that basically adds an extra local tax that's trying to address the housing crisis that most of us on the coasts are experiencing. You and I have the value of our house go up, but then other people can't buy housing. And so
Right.
we're all sort of in this issue. So what I have noticed is when it comes to paying their metro housing tax, or we also have a preschool for all
Mhm,
tax,
mhm.
people just complain about it in a way that I'm like, I know you believe in people being housed. I know you're concerned about houselessness. I know you're concerned about feminism and women of color having access to career growth. And when it comes down to you writing this check, there's another dialogue or monologue happening, and it's quiet but very present.
Hmm.
Does that
I get it. I get it. So when do you address this with your clients? I'm sure you
oh
do.
yeah,
And can I get
yeah.
to the why of it? What is the why of it?
Well, I think there's a few issues. I think there is a narrative right now that government is inefficient.
Right.
And I find this super interesting because we also live in a city with a couple really big corporations, and consequently I'm sort of in environments with people who are around those corporations. And the amount of waste that they produce is gross. But nobody's being like, hey, big company, you shouldn't waste your money. Feels like there's a double standard in how we talk about the efficiencies of humans getting together in institutions to try to solve problems.
Mm.
And it feels like at the governmental level, we're setting a standard that I don't know that we can meet given the amount of crises that are piling on to state and local governments. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But
Um,
they're not saying like I think I see what you're saying is like this disconnect. But do you find any merit to their hesitation? Because systems are broken. Writing a
totally.
check for a tax can be arguably less productive and efficient than donating to a cause directly that's going to use every dollar of that contribution, right?
But I disagree with that. I don't think that's actually true. I think that that's part of the narrative that
Okay.
I, as an individual consumer, can control my money and send it to a nonprofit that's going to use my money for the thing I intend. And but when we do that, we're just actually supporting the problem. We're saying that it's not the government's responsibility, it's the nonprofit's responsibility, who have no legal right to policy, to advocate for policy change or to sue for change. So it can be a way to fund the band-aid,
Okay.
but I don't think it's a solution at the long term. And I think that's where I feel a little stuck because we both run businesses, right? If you want to change something in your business, you and I both know it can take 2, 3, 4 years to envision the thing you want to change, build out the infrastructure, and move the ship. And we have relatively small ships. If we do that at a governmental level, I think there's a way in which we're just not acknowledging how hard and complicated and erratic change can be when we are funding a tax that is specifically intended to change the system.
Well, earlier we were saying before we were recording, I had a hunch that progressives or liberals or Democrats,
Hmm.
we historically have been not pro-tax, but we've been sort of more okay with raising
Yeah.
taxes if it meant benefiting the greater good, the social good.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I wanted to see like how has that shifted? Has it shifted?
Mm, mm,
So there was a recent bipartisan policy center poll. It found that over half of Democrats, 52%, report being dissatisfied with government spending
mm, mm.
compared with just 36% of Republicans, which is a reversal of the historical pattern where
Fascinating.
Democrats were usually more comfortable with government spending. You mentioned in the last 8 years, who has been in
Hmm.
office in the last
Exactly.
8-ish years, right? Give or
Yeah.
take, right?
Yes, exactly.
Um, I don't know if we can say that it is like circumstantial or if this is like the
Hmm.
new normal.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
does that give you more fodder for
Mm,
the
mm.
resistance?
Yeah. Even before the most recent frame of this, I've often heard people like, I just don't feel good about paying federal taxes because so much of it goes to the war, goes to military. It's
Yeah.
usually the sort of left perspective. And I often showed this graphic that took $1 of your tax bill and broke it down into what it actually goes for. And the vast majority of it goes to Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, education, things we believe in. But it's like that last 20%,
Yeah.
we want it to be perfect. Now, this might be a symptom of a deeper problem on the left, which I think we do have that issue. We want things to be perfect instead of just good enough to happen. I think that gut feeling has gotten significantly inflated by the recent, basically 45 and 47. Now we're like, oh, well, he's actually unwinding the government. I paid my taxes and now they're not going to the NEH and the NEA and education. Like I said, they're deconstructing the Department of Education, et cetera. But the core problem is I'm like, yeah, but there's still people on food stamps who need
Yeah.
them. And so it's just like it's almost like, can we hold the both and?
This is what I love about you, actually, Georgia Lee, because you we've had conversations before where you're like, the IRS isn't that bad, guys. Like the
No.
IRS is, as much of, and so there are these narratives, right? And I've
Yes.
come to really, not warm up to Uncle Sam, but like also realize that like I have friends who are like, I don't know if I can pay my tax bill. It's going to be so high. And I'm like, relax. The
Hmm.
IRS has payment plans. The last thing they want is for you to not pay your tax. If it
Yes.
can't be right on time, there
Yes.
are ways to work around it. And the interest rate, if you get an interest rate, is very, very low. Like the penalty
Yeah,
is worth the peace of mind to be able to pay
totally.
this off over time. So I've come to sort of appreciate the IRS more thanks to our
Hmm.
conversations. And
That's great.
but like, well, I did not expect that appreciation to come from a very progressive
Hmm.
gay woman living in
Hmm.
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah,
You
totally.
don't fit
Well,
the criteria. You don't fit the stereotype. You just don't fit the stereotype.
well, I think it's because my own people are now fighting against the IRS, and I'm like, hey, 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 these are neighbors, civil servants who are just trying to do a job to fund the government. Like they're only they just have a job to do. I don't want to hate my grocery delivery dude because they're out of firm tofu. Like it's just not fair. I don't know. There's this way in which we're demonizing an idea when that idea is made up of us.
Yeah.
The government is us. And when we externalize it, that is an alt right strategy. That is a very intentional, historically precedented attempt by the right to make us not believe in taxes and not believe in government, and therefore disengage from the systems of self government.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, are we willing to question our assumptions and the stories we tell ourselves about our resources and money?
What's there's being unhappy about paying your taxes, and then there's
Mm,
just trying to avoid them altogether. Like some really,
mm,
really wealthy people that we all know
mm,
about.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
what's the harm in just being like, ugh?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a feeling. Is it consuming them? Is it showing up in other more dangerous things that they
Yeah.
could stop doing? I think just comparatively, they're probably like it in their mind. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying to like understand where they're coming from. Like maybe some of them are thinking, some of your clients are thinking like, I don't love that we have an inaccessible childcare system in our country.
Mhm.
I guess I'll pay this local tax, but
Mhm.
I'm not confident it's gonna solve for many
Mhm.
people's
Mhm.
problems. But I'll do it,
Mhm.
whatever. I'll do it anyway. But I think they're just like,
Yeah.
okay, fine.
Well, what I find interesting is the dissonance between the reporting I'm hearing from the organizations that are actually pushing forward these programs, and the narrative about the tax and the program. And this might have to do a little bit with local media, where there's a little bit of a gotcha journalism about government. And I just wish it was a little bit more like they are making progress. They're 80% to their goal. They're not 100% of where they were supposed to be, but they're 80%, and there are these systemic issues. And there's this problem that's real and we should address it. But there's a little bit of the frame that gets picked up by the public is let's just throw the whole thing out because there's one bad actor or one really bright, sparkling thing to focus on about why we don't like it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you still can't. Preschool is still $3,000 a month for my colleague. That as a business owner is far more troubling to me than me paying a $17,000 bill or a $30,000 bill. I'm like, I don't have kids. I don't even really like children, to be perfectly honest. But I want them to go to school and I want them to be engaged citizens because I need them to vote for our collective benefit when I'm 80 years old. And they
Yeah.
should care about me as an old woman.
So what do you see as really the causes for this mindset? We talked about a media narrative. We talked
Hmm.
about our own assumptions about what it means to contribute to a nonprofit
Hmm.
versus paying our taxes.
Hmm.
What else are we missing that we can address?
Yeah, I'll dig into that charity piece a little bit more. There's a movement, maybe to call it effective altruism. Have you ever heard of this term?
Yes.
Okay, so it sort of comes from liberal oligarchs. They all are like, we can make the perfect donation. And I think that's an interesting part of this narrative of I can optimize my donations. What's interesting about that frame is oftentimes there's a look at administrative costs for the organizations that you're supporting if they're too high. Important thing to consider, but underneath that is a mandate to keep your payroll and benefits down for the people who actually make your organization run. And so there's this interesting, it feels like a very similar frame of I can make this ideal and it can prove to me that it's doing a good job. And I'm sort of thinking as a donor, that's a lot of responsibility to put on the organization that I'm supporting. And now they're spending a lot of time building data to prove to me that they're doing their job, which requires people to produce the data when they could just go do their job and I could trust them. Like Mackenzie Scott is my example of the best way to donate money is find a hero, give them money and go away. Don't ask them for anything else. And she does it in the millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars, but you and I could do it in the $50 and just be
Mm-hmm.
like, I believe you're doing good out there. So I think that's we've got sort of the perfect is the enemy of the good. I can control this. And by I can control this, I think that's actually about my anxiety. I know
Mm-hmm.
something feels uncertain. And so if I have just a little bit more control, I'll feel better, which of course we see in investing behavior as well. It's like, oh, the
Right.
market's being crazy. I'm going to get out. I'm like, no, please
Oh
God,
my
don't do that.
gosh. When I still hear that from financial planners who manage very wealthy people's assets, that she's like, oh yeah, they always call when the market's down. I'm like, who are these people?
I know. I
Who
know.
are these people? I need to find them and we need to sit down and have a cup of tea and really like examine what they're doing and how it's
Yeah.
not effective. But it's more people than we think.
Oh, and I think again, this comes back to it always comes back to some part of their own history. The like, what is the story you're telling yourself that makes you believe you can outguess the market? I'm like,
Yeah,
no, you just literally can't. There's no data to support that. But there is this feeling that I am anxious and I can take control by hitting sell. And I'm like, but when are you going to hit buy? Like, that's a problem.
exactly. And I think we feel like these down points will be forever. That there is not
Hmm.
a cutoff
Yes.
for a sell off.
That's where I think we have this moment where we can, if we are trying to be intentional in the way we operate around resources, we can start to identify the general story and be like, oh, that's funny. I just said this thing about my local government. Do I actually know that's true? I
Oh
don't even
man.
want people to say, they don't even have to say it's not true. I just want us to ask, do I actually know that's true? Or am
Well,
I repeating something else I heard? I mean, this is your
this
podcast,
is my
really.
podcast. I've been laughing
Yeah.
because the Montclair Pod, which is the hyperlocal podcast, I have the privilege of being on the receiving end of so many people's conspiracy theories about why the
Yes.
school district has debt. Um, what's really going on with that business
Hmm.
down the street,
Mm.
like,
Totally.
and my motto is to just say, my MO is just to say, I don't not believe you, but I would love to share the story that you're telling me when there are
Right.
facts. So,
Exactly.
like, get the facts and we will make it a
Hmm.
story. Like, I'm not shutting my door on this story. I'm just saying, like, come back when you have receipts. Because then it's a
Yes,
story.
exactly.
Then I can't, like, get sued for just, sharing these, blasphemous things about all these people that, you can dislike someone and you can think someone's shady, but that's not a news story.
No, but in our citizen journalism
that
of
alone
social
is not a news
media. It
story.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But
And I
you're right.
think that's
Social
where,
media allows for that. Um,
mhm,
and people forget what journalism actually is. But in any case, you had just come back from Vienna
yeah,
and you noticed there that, it's a different way of life, obviously, in many ways,
yeah.
but especially the way they relate to money and
Hmm.
plan around money. Can you talk a little about the
Hmm.
differences and what's worth maybe bringing over the ocean?
Yeah. Well, when I travel, I'm a little annoying to the tour guides I hire because I'm like, tell me about your financial life because I'm just so
How
fascinated.
much money did you
And
make? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It normally comes up sort of naturally because people who don't live in America think we're insane, think our structures are lunatic. And it comes out in little ways because they know, oh, we have to pay a lot of money for healthcare. And they sort of like, oh, that talk about that. But then I start pulling on the thread and I'm like, oh, how much does college cost for you here? Et cetera. So I asked Yasha, who runs an amazing tour company in Vienna, which I can find the show note name for. And he has two little kids. He has them in private preschool, which is 250 euros a month
What?
for Waldorf style preschool.
What?
Public preschool, he's like, I know it's really sad. They have to pay for food. And I was like, I was like,
That's
that's
true in
I think the
America too.
teacher,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And I'm like, and I'm pretty sure that like the Head Start parents or teachers are probably bringing in their own food for these kids. So
Yeah.
that was one. I started with preschool because he had two little kids he talked about. I was like, so what's college like? And he said, oh, well, you have to finish in 4 years, but it's paid for free for 4 years. And I thought, okay. And then I was like, what about elder care? And he said, well, we have in-home care and they'll come to your home and they'll take, yada, yada. And I was like, okay. And I was like, what about healthcare? And he said, well, people have private care they add on top, but everybody has universal healthcare. And the list goes on, right? But what I find interesting for our purposes, Farnoosh, is Austria is one of the oldest monarchies in Europe. And it went on for centuries of sort of semi-colonialist rule. And then it all fell apart at the beginning of the 1900s. And there were people doing planning, like policy wonks in the background, doing planning, preparing for the moment when they had enough sort of change space in the government to be able to put through social housing. And now the city of Vienna owns 40% of the housing. And housing costs like 15 to 20% of your income max. And it's limited. And I'm talking about inside the city housing. And it's developed by the city. It's designed by the city. Some of the original buildings are designed by some of the most famous architects in Europe. And what's interesting is that now people live in the same building and neighborhood for generations. So families get to grow up around each other. They don't move. People our age and of our economic bracket may or may not own a house because they might say, why would I spend my money on that? I love the housing. I'm right next to my grandmother.
Right.
So I was sitting there and I was like, wow, as a financial planner, I'm not needed for most people in Vienna. And that is great. I wish financial planners were not needed in America.
Oh, wow. Because,
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
ideally.
right. Yeah. Well, are you trying to
Ideally, I would just be for rich people, who have like complex situations that are hard to
family
navigate and
money? Right.
family money, family or like complex businesses or, there, I think it's a skill set that should not need to happen for everyday middle class people because I'm sorry, Farnoosh, as you know, the math is impossible.
Yeah. I remember being in Mexico and our tour guide, he was from France, I want to say, and moved to Mexico, um, and could live off of his tour guide income,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
not true in America. I would venture to guess that tour guides here have 3 or 4 other kinds of jobs,
Yeah.
or they're working
Yeah.
7 days a week and
Yep.
they're barely making ends meet. So,
Right.
um, that's fascinating. What brought you to Vienna?
My former partner and I wanted to go for a last trip. He's been ill, and so we decided to go to Vienna because the classical music is amazing, the architecture is
Yes.
amazing. The Wiener Werkstatt is there, which is the precursor to modernism in architecture and design. So it was really just hear a lot of amazing classical music. The food was not as good as it's German.
No? I guess the Wiener.
It was good. I mean,
What's the
if you like sausage,
Yeah,
you're
Wiener
set.
Schnitzel. Yeah.
Yes, Wiener Schnitzel's really good, but at
Strudel.
some point it's like,
When I was in, I think, middle school, we all got a country and we had to bring a food from that country.
mm,
And I brought strudel.
I mean, it's delicious. It
It's
is a
kind of the
it is a
thing.
land of
I
great
had by
cake.
the I had Austria, so that was
Yeah.
which you learn
Um,
quickly is not Australia when you're like 8 years old. It's a different country.
they are different places. So the last thing I'm going to say about Austria and Vienna is that their tax rate's 50%. Now, when I looked at that, I was like, I would
Well,
happily pay 50% for all those benefits because I literally can never save enough money to fulfill all those goals for
I
myself.
mean, some of us are paying that here with state taxes, local
Yep.
taxes, federal
Yep.
taxes. Definitely in Montclair, some of us are paying more than 50% of our dollars
I
to
think so.
taxes.
That's a good point. The last thing I would say that I think is interesting here is actually go to your tax return and take your total tax paid divided by your total income, total gross income, and figure out what your real effective tax rate or
Yeah.
average tax rate is. Because I have clients who make a pile of money and none of them pay close to that. They pay like sometimes 35%
Man,
state and local
I need their
and
public
federal.
accountant. I need their accountant. I mean, you're right. It's a progressive tax
Yeah.
ladder. So yeah,
Your top rate might be that high,
right,
but
right.
on average, you're probably not very close to that. But that's a good thing. Again, this is about, is that really true? It's
Yeah.
this question of like, am I saying that because I understand the numbers and how that's calculated? Or am I saying that because like my neighbor said that and now I'm saying that because there's like an emotional to it?
We love to complain. We love a good
Negativity bias
argument.
is our natural way.
We love feeling like
Sweet
we're being
things.
taken, We
I
don't love
know.
feeling it. We love to talk about it
Yeah.
express
I mean, a good
suspicion.
kvetch is valuable.
So before we go, is if someone's listening and they're flinching at
Uh-huh.
their tax bill,
hmm
local tax bill especially, what
hmm
is something that what's a reframe that you want them to walk away with?
Yeah. I would think about what resources you have to approach this problem yourself. So do that, and that may just be time to research the situation, go to the sites of the organizations that are running these programs and find out what is their most recent update. So that's one example. Like put a little bit of energy into figuring out whether it's really true and figuring out what specifically about it is true. Like is it the rollout of this program? Is it the staffing? Is it the, whatever, so that when you do talk about it, your dissatisfaction, you have something specific to point to, not just the whole system.
Right.
Because pointing to the whole system also tells me and you and yourself that there is no answer because you've just damned the whole system. So I feel like we have to get more specific about what we are annoyed about
Mm-hmm.
and bring the receipts for that annoyance, to your
Bring the
point earlier.
receipts. Georgia Lee Hussey, thank you so much for pushing our thinking around money. And this wasn't a solutions driven episode. It wasn't like here's the 5 tips for how to feel better about paying your taxes. But I think
No.
it's once in a while we really do have to sit back and just reflect how we reflect on money.
Yes.
And you have an incredible perspective, and we appreciate
Oh,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much, Farnish. Such a pleasure.